Have you ever felt like God was silent when you needed Him the most? You prayed, you waited, but the heavens seemed quiet. So where is God in the silence? What if it's in that very silence that God is working the most? When there are no answers, no signs, no movement, perhaps that's where your faith is being forged the deepest. And maybe that silence is actually your greatest weapon. Not through words, not through reaction, but through complete surrender. Watch until the end, because you're about to discover a powerful truth, one that may forever change how you view waiting silence and your walk of faith. You see, in this world, people often confuse noise with power. They believe the loudest voice wins the debate, that the boldest statement guarantees victory, and the one who speaks first gets ahead. But life has taught me something, and maybe it's time we all start listening more closely. True power doesn't need to make a scene. Real power doesn't crave attention. It doesn't shout to be seen or heard. When it enters a room, it doesn't have to say a word. Its presence alone shifts the atmosphere. Silence, my friend, is not the weakness of the voiceless. It is the strength of the wise. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows who they are and who they belong to. This is the person who's weathered enough storms to understand they don't have to shout back at the wind anymore. They don't need to fight, don't need to prove anything. They stand still because they know exactly who speaks peace to the waves. Think of Jesus for a moment. As he stood before Pilate, as men accused him, mocked him, struck him, and spat on him, he didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He didn't raise his voice to prove his innocence. He remained silent, not because he was powerless, but because he had already won. That silence spoke louder than any defense. That silence was strength. There will be moments in your life when the wisest thing you can do is to say nothing at all. Not because you lack the words, not because you don't know the truth, but because the moment doesn't deserve your energy. It doesn't deserve your peace. You don't have to explain your calling to people who weren't in the room when God called your name. You don't need to justify your journey to those who were never meant to walk it with you. Silence is a response. It's the response of someone who's grown, a sign that you've matured, that you're no longer shaken by opinions or provoked by provocation. It's easy to react, but it takes discipline to remain still. It's easy to argue, but it takes true character to walk away and let God speak for you. You see, when you're silent, it doesn't mean you're ignoring the storm. It means you're trusting that the storm doesn't have the final word. You're not letting people walk all over you. You're letting God lift you above the noise. And when you choose to walk in silence, you're not showing weakness. You're allowing God to do what only He can do, because sometimes even one wrong word spoken too soon can delay the very thing God is trying to do through you. But when you stay silent in faith, you're giving Him full control. And trust me, God never loses control. Let me say this to someone listening right now. You don't need to raise your voice to raise your value. You don't have to argue just to be understood. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay quiet and let God be your defender. Let your actions speak. Let your growth speak. Let the fruit of your life speak. Some of you are feeling exhausted, not because you're on the wrong path, but because you're carrying too many conversations that were never yours to carry. You're drained because you're constantly responding to things that are beneath your calling. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every insult needs a reply. Sometimes silence is the only way to keep your spirit clean while the world throws dirt on your name. And hear this, God hears what they say behind your back. He sees the ones who smile in your face and speak against you the moment you're gone. But if you stay silent, if you refuse to stoop down to their level, God will take care of it. Oh, yes, He will. He will prepare a table for you, not just anywhere, but right there in the presence of your enemies. And you won't have to say a single word. Your silence will be your vindication. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally realize you don't owe anyone an explanation for the blessings God has placed over your life. People may question how you got here. They may wonder why God is opening doors for you, but they weren't there during the nights you cried. They didn't witness the sacrifices you made. They didn't see the battles you fought in silence. So why waste your breath trying to explain? Let them wonder. Let them talk. While they gossip, you grow. While they slander, you soar. While they watch you, keep walking. And if you can master the discipline of silence, you will step into rooms your enemies said you'd never enter. You will receive blessings the world said you didn't deserve. And when the whispers grow louder, when the eyes of doubt fix themselves on you, you still don't have to respond. Your silence is already speaking. Don't clap back. Don't throw shade. Don't say, "I told you so." Just smile. Just keep walking, because that's what the silent do. They don't announce victory. They live in it. So today, make the decision for yourself. Choose silence. Not because you're weak, but because you are wise. Not because you're afraid, but because you trust the one who fights your battles. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you know who speaks on your behalf. Be silent and watch what God does next. Because sometimes in life, it's not about what you say, it's about what you're willing to surrender. There are moments when God calls you into silence, not to punish you, but to prepare you. He wants you to step back, quiet your thoughts, and simply trust Him. Because whether you believe it or not, God often works most powerfully when we speak the least. We live in a noisy world. Everyone's talking, everyone's posting, everyone wants to be seen, to be heard, to be validated. But heaven doesn't respond to noise. Heaven responds to faith. And real faith doesn't always speak. Sometimes real faith just listens. Real faith drops to its knees in silence and whispers, "God, I still trust you. Even when I don't understand, there are blessings that are delayed. Not because you're not ready, but because your spirit is too distracted to hear divine instruction." You can't follow God's direction if you're filling the room with your own voice. Let me tell you, some of the greatest breakthroughs you're praying for are hiding behind a quiet heart. Not a quiet life. Life will always move, but a quiet heart. One that listens, one that trusts, one that doesn't need to rush God because it knows His timing is perfect. When was the last time you sat in stillness? Not scrolling, not talking, not planning, just sitting in the presence of God. Some of the most powerful moments in my walk with the Lord didn't come during the shouting or the singing. They came in the stillness, that sacred hush where the world fades and your soul leans in. That's where God whispers the next step. That's where He corrects the things your pride couldn't hear when you were too busy arguing. It's in that sacred stillness when your soul stops shouting and your mouth stops defending that God begins to heal what the noise tried to hide. You see, when you choose silence, you're not walking away from the battle. You're stepping into the presence of God. You're saying, "Lord, I don't need to fight this my way anymore. I'm tired of trying to fix what's beyond my control. I surrender it all to you." And in that moment, God begins to move. He opens doors you didn't even knock on. He clears paths you never saw coming. He brings peace into places where you once thought you'd drown in anxiety. But it all begins with silence. It begins with trust. Some of you have been speaking too much to people and not enough to God. You've been explaining, defending, venting, complaining, hoping someone will understand what you're going through. But people can't heal what only God can reach. They can't carry the weight only God was meant to lift. And the longer you run to the noise, the longer you'll delay the answer that only comes through silence. There's a reason Jesus often withdrew from the crowds, not because He was tired of healing, not because He was avoiding people, But because he understood something we often forget, silence with the Father refuels the soul. It refreshes the mind. It realigns the mission. You can't pour into others if you're always surrounded by noise. Even the Savior needed stillness to remain strong. And I want to speak to you, the one who feels unheard, the one who's been praying, crying, asking, waiting, and heaven still seems silent. You've been wondering, why isn't God answering me? But maybe the silence isn't absence, it's alignment. Maybe God isn't ignoring you. Maybe he's inviting you to stop speaking long enough, to listen. And if you lean in close, you'll realize he's been speaking all along, through the closed doors, through the delayed blessings, through the things falling apart, so something greater could fall into place. It takes maturity to understand God's silence doesn't mean he's stopped working. Sometimes the greatest miracles are formed in the dark. The seed in the soil makes no sound, yet it grows. The baby in the womb doesn't speak yet, it's being shaped. The caterpillar in the cocoon is silent, but transformation is already underway. If a seed can grow in silence, if life itself can be formed in stillness, then why do we believe that change only comes through noise? God is not moved by how loud we speak. He is not limited by the volume of our voices. He is moved by our surrender. You don't have to remind God of the promises he made to you. He hasn't forgotten. But he might be waiting for your stillness before he releases what he has prepared. He might be waiting for your silence before he shows you the next door. Because when you're still, your eyes open, your ears grow sharper, and your faith grows deeper. And when that happens, you don't just receive the blessing, you're ready to carry it. So stop trying to out-talk your fears. Stop trying to out-shout your enemies. You don't need to post it. You don't have to prove it. You don't have to explain it. Just be still. God is not deaf. He is not late. He is simply waiting for you to be quiet enough to hear him say, "This is the way, walk in it." And you don't realize how valuable your peace is until you start losing it. Until you find yourself drained, not from hard work, but from carrying conversations that go nowhere, from defending yourself against people who already made up their minds, from reacting to every comment, every look, every word thrown your way. Then it hits you. Your peace is more precious than your point. And in that moment, silence becomes your shield. There are some things in life that simply are not worth your voice. Not because you don't care, not because you're weak, but because you finally learned that maturity doesn't react, it responds. And more often than not, it responds with silence. You see, every time you respond to something that doesn't serve your purpose, you pay a price. You pay with your energy. You pay with your focus. You pay with your time. And some of us today, we're spiritually bankrupt because we've spent too much attention on things that never deserved it to begin with. We've let the world drag us into battles we were never called to fight. We've turned our peace into a platform for debates, our hearts into targets for the projections of others. But hear me when I say this. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Not every accusation needs a defense. Not every situation needs your voice. Some things only need to be met with silence, because silence isn't just a reaction, it's a boundary. And that boundary protects what is most sacred within you. So what is sacred? Your purpose, your calling, your relationship with God. Every time you respond to petty offenses, whispers of gossip, or posts made to provoke you, you're handing over the peace God gave you to people who neither earned it nor can protect it. That's not wisdom, that's self-sabotage. There comes a moment in your walk with God when you no longer stay silent because of who they are. You stay silent because of who He is, because you now understand the battle isn't yours, the burden isn't yours, the outcome isn't yours to control. All you need to do is stand still, hold your peace, and let the Lord fight for you. There's a beautiful verse that says, "In quietness and trust shall be your strength." That's not just poetic, it's powerful, it's practical. When you stop chasing after noise, stop explaining yourself, stop reacting to every push and pull from the outside world, you discover something deep within: strength, clarity, peace, not from your surroundings, but from your surrender. And I know it's not easy. It's not easy to stay silent when you're misunderstood. It's not easy to hold your tongue when someone is lying about your name. It's not easy to walk away when you know you could prove your point. But listen, God isn't calling you to win arguments. He's calling you to win the war within. He's not asking you to be right in their eyes. He's asking you to be righteous in His. That means you don't need to explain why you walked away from certain people. You don't have to justify why you're not answering every message. You don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your peace. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is simply smile, say nothing, and keep walking, because your silence is a sign of your growth. Your silence is part of your healing. Your silence is your strength. Let them talk. Let them assume. Let them misunderstand, because here's the truth: they talked about Jesus too. And still He fulfilled His purpose. Still He rose. Still He changed the world, not with arguments, but with obedience. Jesus changed the world, not with arguments, but with presence. And if He could stand in silence before His accusers, knowing exactly who He was, then so can you. You don't need to defend yourself when heaven is already standing in your defense. You don't have to react when you know your reaction might cost you your peace. Just because someone is loud doesn't mean they're right. And just because you're quiet doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes silence is the boldest declaration that your spirit belongs to God, not to people's opinions. You want to grow, you want to walk in peace, then you must protect your energy, guard your mind, and be intentional about what deserves your voice, because your voice is powerful, and what is powerful must be protected. Be silent. Let peace become your greatest weapon. There's a reason why God says be still, not just to stop moving, but to quiet the noise within your heart and your mind, because silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of trust. It's saying, Lord, I don't understand what you're doing right now, but I believe it's good. And in that silence, strength is born. Sometimes we're so busy talking, stressing, planning, complaining, that we forget God already has the answer. We think that if we say more, plan, more stress, more, maybe something will shift. But faith doesn't grow in noise. It grows in stillness. It grows the moment you stop asking why and start saying, I trust you anyway. You see, real trust shows itself when the way forward is unclear, when everything is dark, uncertain, when your prayers feel unanswered, when your steps feel shaky. That's when faith steps in. That's when silence becomes power. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of confidence. The kind of silence that says, even if I don't understand, I know who holds tomorrow. God doesn't always explain. He doesn't always send details, but He does promise His presence. And sometimes He's just waiting for you to stop talking long enough to feel it, because you can't hear the whisper of the Holy Spirit when your mind is crowded with fear. When you stay silent long enough, when you stop the fear and hush the complaints, you'll begin to realize He's been there all along, right in the middle of your storm. Some of you are walking through a season right now that makes no sense at all. You're trying to trust, but everything feels stuck. Nothing's opening, nothing's moving, nothing's changing, and the temptation to panic is creeping in. You feel like going back. You feel like compromising. You want to say something, do something, anything just to feel like you're in motion. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Just be still. Just trust. Just stay silent and let God be God. Think of the Israelites standing at the edge of the Red Sea. Their enemies were behind them. The sea in front, no way forward, no way back. And what did God say? Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. He didn't tell them to build a boat. He didn't tell them to run. He told them to stand, to be still, to trust. And in the moment they obeyed, the sea split wide open. That's the kind of God we serve, the one who makes a way where there is no way. But he doesn't always move when we speak. Sometimes he moves when we stop speaking, when we stop panicking, when we stop trying to control everything, when we finally say, God, I surrender this fully to you. You can't hold the pen and ask God to write your story at the same time. At some point, you've got to let go. You've got to say, even if I don't see it, I'll trust you. Even if I don't hear you, I know you're near. Even if nothing feels different, I believe you're working behind the scenes. That kind of trust, quiet, deep, unwavering, moves heaven. It's easy to trust God when everything is going right, when doors open and blessings pour down. But what about when the door stays shut, when the answer is delayed, when all you get is silence? That's where true trust is tested, and that's where silence becomes strength, because trust doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits, quietly, humbly, not needing to know the timeline, not demanding an explanation, just still because it knows. And when you learn to wait in stillness, when you trust without needing to understand, you'll realize God has never left you. He is too faithful to fail, too good to forget, and too wise to make a mistake. So don't let the silence scare you. Don't let the delay make you doubt. God hasn't abandoned you. He hasn't overlooked you. He's building something in you. He's teaching you to walk by faith, not by sight. He's showing you that you don't need every answer, you just need Him. And one day when the silence finally breaks and the blessing comes, you'll look back and realize it was worth the wait. You'll thank Him for not letting you rush, for not answering too soon, for holding you in that quiet place until your heart was ready to receive what your words weren't mature enough to carry. So trust Him. Trust Him in the silence. Trust Him when it makes no sense. Trust Him when every part of you wants to panic. Because sometimes the loudest faith comes from the quietest heart. Be silent and let your trust speak louder than your words. There comes a time in your journey when God begins to shift the people around you. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake it as punishment when it's actually preparation. You'll think you're being rejected, but really you're being protected. And in moments like that, silence becomes more than posture, it becomes survival. Because not everyone who starts with you is meant to finish with you. Not everyone who claps for you in one season is called to walk with you into the next. And sometimes the hardest part of growth is outgrowing people you thought you'd never have to live without. But listen, you don't have to announce it. You don't have to explain it. You don't even have to defend it. Be silent and let God do the separating. Some relationships are seasonal. Some friendships were only meant for a chapter, not the entire story. And when God starts turning the page, it's not your job to hold on to characters who don't belong in the next scene. You don't need closure when you have peace. You don't need revenge when you've been released. You don't need to chase those who walked away when God is calling you forward. But let's be honest. The flesh always wants answers, doesn't it? Yes, it's true. The flesh always wants answers. It wants reasons, explanations, clarity. We want to know why they changed, why they left, why they lied, why they treated us that way. And honestly, we want to speak up. We want to expose the betrayal, confront the disrespect, explain ourselves, defend our name. But friends, silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's trusting that what God will reveal in His time will be far more powerful than anything you could say right now. You don't need to broadcast the pain they caused. You don't need to drag their name through the dirt. God saw it all. He heard every conversation behind your back. He saw the doors they tried to close. He witnessed the manipulation, the gossip, the sabotage. And He also said, "Vengeance is mine." Not yours, not your emotions, not your voice, His. And when you hand the battle over to God, your silence becomes a weapon. There's a kind of silence that speaks louder than words, a silence that confuses the enemy, a silence that boldly declares, I know who I am, I know whose I am, and I don't need to fight for a seat at any table because God prepares one for me in the presence of my enemies. When you walk in that kind of silence, you walk in divine confidence, not because you're perfect, but because you're protected. Sometimes the people who left had to leave so you could hear God's voice more clearly. Sometimes the betrayal had to happen so your heart could be purified. Sometimes the silence was necessary because their noise was drowning out your discernment. And when God removes someone from your life, He doesn't need your permission, only your obedience. You won't always understand it in the moment. You won't always see the purpose in the pain. But one day you'll look back and realize God was saving you, saving your time, saving your destiny, saving your soul. Some of the people He removed weren't just distractions, they were delays. And in His mercy, He made space for your purpose to breathe. So don't try to reopen the door God already closed. Don't explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Don't hold on to those who have already let go, because the more you defend yourself, the more drained you'll become. When you stop trying to defend yourself, when you choose to be still and hand the battle over to God, that's when He begins to do something beautiful. When you stay silent, when you surrender the hurt, when you trust that God is working behind the scenes, He restores you without your help. That's when healing comes, not when you win the argument, not when you post the truth, not even when they finally say, I'm sorry. Healing comes when you can sit in silence and still feel the presence of God, when you can walk away without bitterness, when you can bless them in your prayers even though they cursed you with their words. That kind of peace doesn't come from people, it comes from God. And maybe that's where you are right now. Trying to make sense of a sudden separation, your heart aching over people you deeply loved, tempted to speak up to clear the air to prove your innocence. But hear me, there's more strength in your silence than in your defense, because the God who sees in secret will reward you openly. And when He does, no lie, no rumor, no betrayal will stop what He has planned for your life. Be silent and let God remove who He needs to remove so He can make room for what's coming next. There is something sacred about silence when it's rooted in surrender, not the silence of fear or failure, but the kind that says, Lord, I've said all I can say. I've done all I can do. Now I'm letting go and letting You take over. That's when miracles begin. Not when you fight harder, but when you finally lay down your weapons. Life will stretch you. It'll test your patience. There will be seasons when everything feels delayed, your dreams, your prayers, your healing. And in those moments, silence becomes the soil where patience and trust take root. Because sometimes God's greatest work isn't seen in the noise of progress, but in the quiet of waiting. You may be praying for something right now, and heaven feels silent. No signs, no answers, no change, but just because you hear nothing doesn't mean God is doing nothing. His silence is not absence, it's preparation. Because God often does His deepest work in the quiet. He shapes character in the waiting. He tests motives in the stillness. He purifies desires in the delay. God doesn't stay silent to punish you, He stays silent to prepare you. And it's in the waiting, in the stillness, in the surrender that His deepest work begins. Because waiting in silence doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing something harder, trusting. It means showing up every day with faith even when there's no evidence. It means choosing hope even when doubt is screaming louder. It means resting in the promise, not wrestling with the process. You see, when you learn to be silent in the face of delay, you begin to walk by faith and not by sight. You stop needing instant results. You stop needing applause. You stop needing everything to make sense. Because your confidence is no longer in the outcome, it's in the one who holds the outcome. That kind of silence isn't passive. It's powerful. It says, I don't need to rush what God is doing. I don't need to beg for what's already mine. I don't need to force open a door that isn't ready. If God said it, I'll stand on it, even if I have to wait quietly in the hallway for a while. And let me tell you something, the hallway can be holy ground. That space between promise and fulfillment is where your roots grow deep. It's where your pride dies. It's where your faith matures. Some of the most anointed men and women didn't find God on the mountaintop. They found Him in the silence of delay. Look at Joseph in the prison, David in the wilderness, Moses in the desert, even Jesus in the tomb. All of them walked through seasons of silence. All of them endured divine delays. And in each story, God was not late. He was right on time. Because heaven doesn't move by your clock. It moves by His purpose. We often mistake silence for punishment. But silence is sometimes God's mercy. If He gave you what you wanted too soon, it could crush you. If He opened the door before you were ready, it might become a burden instead of a blessing. God loves you too much to give you something you're not ready to carry, so He waits. And in that waiting, He calls you into silence, not to frustrate you, but to strengthen you, to stretch your trust, to realign your heart, to bring you to the end of yourself so you will fully depend on Him. And when the time is right, when everything is in place, and when God's timing arrives, not early, not late, but right on time, everything you quietly endured, waited for, and believed through will become a living testimony of His faithfulness. When your spirit is steady, when your heart is pure, when your silence turns into surrender, that's when God moves. And when He moves, it won't be because of your effort. It won't be because you pushed hard enough. It will be because He ordained it, because you waited in silence and He honored your trust. But I know it's not easy. I know it hurts when everything feels still, when prayers go unanswered, when dreams start to fade from view. But listen to me, your silence is not wasted. God hears the cry of your heart, even when your lips say nothing. He sees every tear you cry in private. He counts them. He keeps them. And He responds not always in your time, but always in the right time. So be still. Be silent. Keep showing up. Keep believing. Keep surrendering. Let the silence teach you how to listen, how to wait, how to trust. Because one day the silence will break. And when it does, you'll look back and realize God was working the whole time. Be silent and let your surrender make room for God's supernatural timing. And when that moment finally comes, when the doors open, when the prayers are answered, when the dream becomes reality, you won't have to say a single word. The silence you carried, the surrender you embraced, will speak louder than any explanation ever could. No need to announce it. No need to prove anything. Just walk forward in peace with strength and full of gratitude, because deep within your spirit you'll know it was God who did this. Not your effort, not your strategy, not the approval of others, but His grace, His timing, His faithfulness. You'll see what the waiting produced in you: a matured faith, a humble heart, a soul anchored in God's presence. You'll realize that silence never weakened you, it refined you. You'll understand that in the moments when God was quiet, He was actually teaching you the most. And then you'll stop fearing silence. You'll stop panicking in unanswered prayers, because now you know silence doesn't mean God isn't moving. Waiting doesn't mean He's forgotten. Silence is where faith is forged, where trust is stretched, where we stop relying on what we see and start walking by what we believe. So if you're in that quiet place right now between the promise and the fulfillment, be still, stay grounded, keep trusting, because the one you're waiting on has never failed to show up. If this message has touched your heart, hit subscribe so you won't miss the life-giving reminders from God's Word. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell for the next video, a place where you'll continue to be uplifted and reminded that you are not alone on this journey of faith. Let your silence become strength, and may every next step you take Be grounded in His light.